Have you ever noticed how the moment you decide not to fight back, something inside you starts to feel strangely powerful? Not loud, not aggressive, not desperate, just steady. There is a kind of strength that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't rush to prove anything. It doesn't scramble to defend its name. It stands still while everything around it shakes because it knows something deeper than what the moment is trying to suggest. And tonight, I need you to hear this with your spirit, not just your ears. You are so protected that you don't even have to retaliate. That goes against everything the world has taught you. The world says, answer them. The world says, defend yourself. The world says, if you stay silent, you lose. But God operates on a completely different system. His ways are not built on reaction. His power is not activated by your retaliation. His justice is not dependent on your ability to argue your case. There are battles you were never designed to fight. Not because you are weak, but because you are covered. And when you truly understand that, something shifts inside of you. You stop exhausting yourself trying to correct every lie. You stop draining your energy trying to prove your worth. You stop stepping down into spaces where your spirit was never meant to dwell, because protection changes your posture. When you know you are protected, you don't panic the same way. When you know God is guarding you, you don't rush to fix everything. When you know heaven is backing you, you don't feel the need to raise your voice just to be heard. You become still in places where you used to react. And that stillness is not weakness. It is evidence that you trust God to handle what you cannot see. Because let's be honest, some of the things that have been said about you, some of the ways you've been treated, some of the moments where people misunderstood your heart, they hurt deeply. There were times you wanted to respond. Times you replayed conversations in your mind, thinking of what you should have said. Times when silence felt like surrender. But it wasn't surrender, it was alignment. You were being aligned with a higher way of living, a way that doesn't depend on human approval, a way that doesn't collapse under pressure, a way that understands that God sees what people miss and He handles what people distort. You don't have to chase justice when you are walking with the one who defines it. And I know that's hard to accept sometimes, because waiting on God doesn't always feel satisfying in the moment. It doesn't give you that immediate release that retaliation promises. It doesn't give you the quick feeling of, I got them back. But what it gives you is something far greater. It gives you peace that cannot be shaken by other people's opinions. It gives you clarity that is not clouded by emotion. It gives you a future that is not sabotaged by temporary reactions, because every time you choose not to retaliate, you are choosing something bigger than the moment. You are choosing your purpose over your pride. You are choosing your calling over your comfort. You are choosing God's timing over your impulse. And that choice is not easy. It requires restraint when everything in you wants to respond. It requires faith when you don't see immediate results. It requires trust when it feels like silence is costing you something. But what you don't see is what God is doing behind that silence. He is rearranging things. He is exposing what needs to be revealed. He is protecting you from outcomes that your reaction would have triggered, because not every response leads to resolution. Sometimes your reaction is exactly what the situation is trying to pull out of you, so it can trap you in a cycle you were meant to rise above. And God, in His wisdom, will sometimes hold you back, not to limit you, but to preserve you. You thought you were being ignored, but you were being shielded. You thought you were losing, but you were being covered. You thought your silence made you look weak, but heaven saw it as strength under control. There is something sacred about restraint when it is guided by God. It's not about suppressing your voice. It's about elevating your response. Because when God fights for you, He doesn't just address the surface. He goes to the root. He doesn't just correct the moment. He shifts the entire outcome. And the truth is, some battles end more powerfully when you don't touch them. Some doors close more completely when you don't try to force them open. Some misunderstandings clear themselves when you stop trying to control how people see you, because God has a way of revealing truth without your interference. And when that revelation comes, it carries a weight that no argument ever could. You don't have to convince people of who you are when God is already working on your behalf. You don't have to defend your character when your life is already speaking. You don't have to chase validation when your identity is already secured in Him. That's what protection looks like. It's not always loud, it's not always visible, but it is constant. It's there in the moment you walk away instead of reacting. It's there in the times you stay quiet when you could have spoken. It's there in the restraint that feels uncomfortable, but ultimately brings peace. And I need you to understand something. Your silence is not empty. It is full of trust. Trust that God knows the full story. Trust that God sees every detail. Trust that God is not late, even when it feels like nothing is happening, because something is always happening, even when you don't see it, even when you don't feel it, even when everything around you suggests otherwise. God is working in ways that don't require your interference. And that's where freedom begins. Freedom from needing to prove yourself. Freedom from needing to respond to every opinion. Freedom from being emotionally controlled by situations that don't deserve your energy. You become selective with your responses, not because you don't care, but because you understand what matters. And what matters is not winning every argument. What matters is staying aligned with God. Because when you are aligned with Him, everything else eventually falls into place. Not always in the way you expect, but always in a way that protects your purpose. And your purpose is too important to be compromised by temporary emotions. Your calling is too significant to be derailed by unnecessary battles. Your future is too valuable to be shaped by reactive decisions. So you stand still, not because you have nothing to say, but because you trust God to say what needs to be said through your life. And that kind of trust changes everything. It changes how you see conflict. It changes how you handle pressure. It changes how you move through situations that used to overwhelm you, because now you are not operating from fear. You are operating from faith, faith that God is your defender, faith that God is your protector, faith that God is your vindicator. And when that faith becomes real to you, retaliation starts to lose its appeal. Because you realize you don't need it. You don't need to fight every battle. You don't need to answer every accusation. You don't need to prove every point. Because God is already handling what you cannot see. And His way is always higher. His timing is always precise. His justice is always complete. So you rest not in laziness, but in confidence. Not in avoidance, but in trust. Not in silence out of fear, but in peace that comes from knowing you are covered. And that peace, it's powerful. It carries you through moments that would have broken you before. It steadies you when everything feels uncertain. It reminds you that you are not alone, even when it feels like you are standing by yourself, because you are never truly alone when God is with you. And if God is with you, then you are protected in ways you don't even fully understand. And the deeper you walk in that trust, the more you begin to notice something remarkable. The things that once triggered you start to lose their grip on you. It's not that people suddenly change overnight. It's not that situations stop being unfair. It's that you are no longer easily pulled into places that drain your spirit. There is a quiet transformation happening within you, where your reactions are no longer automatic, where your peace is no longer fragile, where your identity is no longer negotiable. You begin to carry yourself differently. There is a calmness in your presence that cannot be faked, a steadiness in your spirit that doesn't rise and fall with every opinion or every misunderstanding. And that calmness, it comes from knowing that God is not only aware of your situation, but actively involved in it. See, when you truly believe that God is handling things, you stop trying to control outcomes that were never yours to manage. You stop feeling responsible for correcting every narrative. You stop thinking that everything depends on your effort. Because it doesn't. God does not need your anxiety to accomplish His will. He does not require your frustration to bring justice. He is not limited by your silence. In fact, sometimes your silence creates the very space God uses to move. Because when you step back, God steps forward in ways that leave no doubt about who was in control. When you release the need to respond, you make room for a response that carries divine authority. And when that response comes, it doesn't just address the issue, it settles it. There is a finality in what God does that no human effort can replicate. That's why some of the greatest victories in your life will not come from what you said, but from what you resisted saying. Not from what you did, but from what you chose not to do. Because restraint, when it is guided by God, is not passive. It is strategic. It is a form of obedience that requires strength most people don't understand. Anyone can react. Anyone can speak out of emotion. But it takes a different kind of power to hold your peace when your flesh is urging you to fight back. That power, it comes from alignment. Alignment with a God who sees beyond the moment. A God who understands the full picture. A God who knows how every decision, every word, every reaction will echo into your future. And because He sees what you cannot, He sometimes leads you in ways that feel uncomfortable. He will tell you to stay quiet when you feel justified to speak. He will tell you to walk away when you feel entitled to stay and argue. He will tell you to trust when everything in front of you seems uncertain. Not because he wants to deny you, but because he wants to protect what he is building in you. There is something God is forming in your life that requires discipline in your responses. Something that cannot be developed if you react to everything that challenges you. Something that demands maturity, patience, and a deep reliance on him. And every time you choose his way over your impulse, that foundation gets stronger. You are becoming someone who is not easily shaken. Someone who is not easily provoked. Someone who does not lose direction in the middle of pressure. And that kind of person carries weight. Not the kind of weight that burdens, but the kind that commands respect without demanding it. The kind that shifts atmospheres without forcing anything. The kind that reflects God in a way that words alone never could. Because there is a message in how you carry yourself. A message that says, I know who is fighting for me. A message that says, I don't need to prove anything here. A message that says, my peace is not up for negotiation. And people may not always understand it. Some may even mistake your silence for weakness. They may assume you don't have a response. They may think you are avoiding confrontation because you are afraid. But they don't see what's happening beneath the surface. They don't see the strength it takes to remain composed when emotions are rising. They don't see the discipline it takes to hold your tongue when you have every reason to speak. They don't see the faith it takes to trust God when the outcome is not yet visible, but God sees it. And not only does he see it, he honors it. He honors the moments you choose peace over pride. He honors the times you walk away instead of escalating. He honors the decisions that reflect trust in him rather than dependence on yourself. Nothing about your restraint is wasted. Every choice to remain aligned with God is building something greater than the moment you are in. It is shaping your character, strengthening your spirit, and positioning you for what is ahead. Because where God is taking you, you cannot afford to be easily triggered. Where God is leading you, you cannot afford to react out of emotion. Where God is placing you, you cannot afford to be pulled into every distraction. There's too much at stake. Your purpose is not small. Your calling is not ordinary. And your future is not something that can be handled carelessly. So God is teaching you now how to stand without reacting, how to trust without controlling, how to move without being moved by everything around you. And this lesson, it will serve you in ways you cannot yet fully understand. Because there will come a time when you look back and realize that the moments you wanted to retaliate were actually moments of redirection. Moments where God was steering you away from unnecessary battles and to something far more significant. And you will be grateful that you didn't react, grateful that you didn't say everything you felt, grateful that you didn't engage in things that would have pulled you off course, because you will see clearly that God was not ignoring your situation. He was preserving your destiny. There is a level of protection on your life that goes beyond what you can see. A covering that blocks things before they reach you. A guidance that redirects you before you make decisions that could cost you. A presence that stays with you even when everything else feels uncertain. And when you truly understand that, something inside of you settles. You stop striving. You stop overthinking every situation. You stop carrying burdens that were never yours to carry. Because you realize you are not doing life on your own. God is actively involved. He is leading, guarding, correcting, and sustaining you in ways that don't always make sense in the moment, but always make sense in the end. And that realization brings a different kind of peace, not a temporary calm that disappears when things get difficult, but a deep, unshakable peace that remains even when everything around you is unsettled. A peace that allows you to sleep at night without replaying every conversation. A peace that allows you to move forward without constantly looking back. A peace that reminds you that no matter what happens, you are still covered. And that is why you don't have to retaliate. Not because you don't feel the urge, not because situations don't affect you, but because you understand something deeper. You understand that God is not passive. He is not distant. He is not unaware. He is present and He is working. Working in ways you cannot see. Working through circumstances you don't fully understand. Working behind the scenes to bring about outcomes that are far greater than anything you could achieve through reaction. And there is another layer to this that most people never reach, because it requires a kind of surrender that goes beyond surface level faith. It is the place where you are no longer just trusting God to defend you. You are trusting Him to define the entire outcome of your life, even when it doesn't match your expectations. Because sometimes the real test is not whether God will protect you from people. It is whether you will still trust Him when He allows certain things to unfold in a way you didn't anticipate. There are moments when God will let situations play out just long enough to reveal something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface, something you would have never seen if everything had been resolved quickly. And in those moments, it can feel confusing. It can feel like delay. It can feel like silence. But it is never absence. God does not step away from you when things become uncomfortable. He steps closer in ways that refine you. He allows pressure not to break you, but to show you what He has already placed within you. And what He has placed within you is stronger than your urge to react. It is deeper than your need to be understood. It is greater than your desire to be validated by people who cannot see what God sees in you. There is a quiet confidence forming in you that does not rely on applause. It does not depend on agreement. It does not collapse when misunderstood. It stands because it is rooted in something eternal. And that kind of confidence, it cannot be shaken by temporary voices. Because you begin to understand that not every voice deserves your response. Not every opinion deserves your attention. Not every situation deserves your energy. Discernment starts to guide you. You become aware of what is worth engaging and what is simply a distraction. designed to pull you away from where God is leading you. And once that awareness becomes clear, your decisions change. You no longer feel obligated to entertain every conflict. You no longer feel pressured to explain yourself to people who have already decided not to understand. You no longer feel the need to step into spaces where your peace will be compromised. Because you recognize something vital, your peace is not something you can afford to lose. It is not just a feeling. It is a foundation. And God has been building that foundation in you. Layer by layer, through every situation where you chose trust over reaction, through every moment where you chose stillness over chaos. So now, when something tries to disturb that peace, you don't rush to defend yourself. You guard what God has built within you. You protect your alignment. You protect your clarity. You protect your connection with Him. Because you know that once your peace is disturbed, your perspective can become clouded. And when your perspective is clouded, your decisions can become compromised. And your decisions, they matter more than the moment you are in. That is why God teaches you restraint. Not to silence you, but to sharpen you. Not to weaken you, but to strengthen your ability to move with wisdom instead of impulse. Because impulse reacts to what is seen. Wisdom responds to what is known in the Spirit. And when you begin to operate from that place, you are no longer easily manipulated by circumstances. You are no longer easily drawn into emotional traps. You are no longer easily distracted from your path. You become focused. There is a direction to your life that is not easily interrupted. A sense of purpose that keeps you grounded even when things around you feel unstable. And that focus, it is protected. Because God does not just protect you from people. He protects you from becoming someone you were never meant to be. He protects you from reacting in ways that would damage your character. He protects you from making decisions that would lead you away from your calling. He protects you from stepping into battles that would drain you instead of develop you. And sometimes the greatest protection is not what He blocks. It is what He keeps you from becoming. Because if you had responded the way you felt in certain moments, you might have satisfied your emotions, but you would have stepped out of alignment. If you had said everything that was on your mind, you might have felt relief for a moment, but you would have created consequences that linger far beyond that moment. If you had engaged in every situation that challenged you, you might have proven a point, but you would have lost something far more valuable. And God, in His wisdom, knows how to preserve you from that. He knows how to guide you through situations without letting them define you. He knows how to allow challenges without letting them consume you. He knows how to shape you in a way that prepares you for what is ahead. Because what is ahead, it requires a version of you that is not easily shaken. A version of you that is not controlled by emotions. A version of you that does not need to retaliate to feel secure. And you are becoming that version, one decision at a time. Every moment you choose trust over reaction, you are stepping into that person. Every time you choose peace over pride, you are aligning with that identity. Every situation you walk away from, instead of engaging unnecessarily, you are growing into that strength. And that growth, it may not always be visible to others, but it is undeniable in the spirit. Because God is not just preparing your circumstances, He is preparing you, preparing your heart to handle more, preparing your mind to stay focused, preparing your spirit to remain steady, even when the pressure increases. And as that preparation continues, you will begin to notice something else. The need to be right starts to fade. The need to win every argument starts to lose its importance. The need to prove yourself starts to dissolve, because you realize that your identity is not on trial, it is already established. And once you are secure in that, there is nothing left to defend. You are no longer reacting to protect your image. You are simply living from a place of truth that does not need validation, and that is freedom. Freedom from the weight of other people's perceptions. Freedom from the pressure to constantly respond. Freedom from the cycle of conflict that never truly leads to peace. You step out of that cycle, you rise above it. Not by force, not by resistance, but by alignment with something higher. And in that alignment, there is a clarity that cannot be shaken. You begin to see things for what they are. You begin to recognize distractions before they pull you in. You begin to understand that not everything deserves your involvement. And that understanding, it protects you, because it keeps you focused on what truly matters. It keeps you moving in the direction God has set for you. It keeps you grounded in a way that cannot be easily disrupted. And as you continue to walk in that understanding, your life begins to reflect something powerful, a quiet authority, not loud, not forceful, but undeniable. An authority that comes from being aligned with God. An authority that does not need to announce itself. An authority that speaks through your presence, your peace, your consistency, and people will notice it. They may not always understand it, but they will feel it. Because there is something different about someone who is not easily pulled into conflict. There is something different about someone who carries peace in the middle of chaos. There is something different about someone who does not need to retaliate to feel secure. That difference, it is God working through you. It is His presence shaping your responses. It is His wisdom guiding your decisions. It is His protection covering your life. And as that becomes more evident, you will no longer question whether you should respond to certain things. You will know, you will feel it in your spirit. You will recognize when something is beneath the level God is calling you to operate in. And you will choose differently. Not because it is easy, but because it is right. Not because you don't feel anything, but because you feel something deeper than emotion. A conviction, a knowing, a quiet assurance that God is in control. And that assurance, it will carry you through moments that would have shaken you before. It will steady you when everything around you feels uncertain. It will remind you again and again that you are not alone in this, that you are covered, that you are guided, that you are protected in ways that go beyond what you can see. And there comes a moment, quiet, almost unannounced, when you realize you are no longer the same persons who once felt the need to answer everything. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in layers, in small decisions. In moments where you pause instead of reacting, where you breathe instead of speaking, where you walk away instead of staying to prove a point. And one day, you look back and notice the things that used to pull you in no longer have access to you. That is not distance. That is growth under God's covering. Because when God matures your spirit, He doesn't just change what you do. He changes what moves you. He changes what matters to you. He changes how deeply things are allowed to reach into your heart. There are things now that simply cannot disturb you the way they used to. Not because you have become cold, but because you have become anchored. Anchored in a truth that cannot be shaken by temporary situations. Anchored in a relationship that is not dependent on human behavior. Anchored in a presence that stays constant even when everything else shifts. And that anchoring, it creates a different kind of stability. You begin to stand in situations where you would have once collapsed emotionally. You begin to observe things without immediately internalizing them. You begin to understand that not everything directed at you is meant to define you. Some things are just passing through. Some words are just noise. Some situations are just tests of whether you will remain where God has positioned you, or whether you will step out of alignment to defend something He has already secured. And once you see that clearly, you stop taking everything personally. You stop carrying what was never assigned to you. You stop allowing temporary voices to dictate permanent decisions, because you realize something powerful. God has already settled things in the spirit that you are still trying to resolve in the natural. And when that truth settles in your heart, you start to relax in a way you never have before. Not careless, not indifferent, but deeply at peace. A peace that is not shaken by what people say. A peace that is not dependent on circumstances changing immediately. A peace that flows from knowing that God is not trying to figure things out. He has already gone ahead of you. So while you are standing in a moment that feels uncertain, God is already in the outcome. While you are wondering how things will unfold, God has already seen the full picture. And because of that, your role is not to control the process. It is to trust the one who holds it. And trust, real trust, it changes your posture. You don't move with urgency anymore. You don't feel pressured to respond instantly. You don't feel the need to fix everything right away. Because you understand that timing matters. And God's timing is not rushed. It is intentional. It is precise. It is perfectly aligned with what needs to happen, when it needs to happen. So you begin to slow down in the best way. You begin to move with awareness instead of reaction. You begin to listen more deeply before speaking. You begin to discern more clearly before engaging. And that discernment, it protects you from unnecessary battles. Because not every confrontation is meant to be addressed. Some are meant to be ignored. Some are meant to be outgrown. Some are meant to reveal to you that you are no longer in the same place you used to be. And that realization, it brings a quiet confidence, not arrogance, not superiority, but a grounded understanding of where you stand with God. You no longer need to prove your strength. You no longer need to demonstrate your worth. You no longer need to convince people of your value, because your value was never determined by their recognition. It was established by God long before they formed an opinion. And when you truly accept that, something lifts off your shoulders. The weight of needing to be understood, the pressure of needing to be right, the burden of needing to respond to everything. It all begins to fade because you are no longer living for approval. You are living from alignment. And alignment with God, it simplifies things. It clarifies what matters. It filters out what doesn't. It gives you a sense of direction that is not easily disrupted. So when distractions come, and they will, you don't get pulled in the same way. You recognize them for what they are. You see the pattern. You understand the attempt to pull you out of position. And instead of reacting, you remain steady. Because you have learned that your position matters more than your reaction. Where you stand spiritually matters more than what you say emotionally. And every time you choose to stay grounded, you are reinforcing something within you that cannot be shaken. A stability that does not depend on external conditions. A strength that is not visible on the surface, but undeniable in its impact. And over time, that stability begins to influence everything around you. Your presence carries peace into spaces that once felt tense. Your responses carry wisdom into situations that once felt chaotic. Your restraint carries authority into moments where others expect reaction. Because there is something powerful about someone who refuses to be pulled out of alignment. It speaks without words. It shifts atmospheres without effort. It reflects God in a way that cannot be imitated. And that reflection, it becomes your testimony. Not something you have to explain, but something people can see. They may not understand how you remain calm. They may not understand why you don't react. They may not understand how you maintain your peace, but they will recognize that something is different. And that difference, it points back to God, because only He can produce that kind of transformation. Only He can take someone who once reacted to everything and turn them into someone who moves with intention. Only He can replace the need to defend with the confidence of being covered. Only He can create a peace that does not depend on circumstances. And that peace, it becomes your strength. It carries you through moments that would have overwhelmed you before. It anchors you when everything else feels unstable. It reminds you again and again that you are not navigating life on your own. God is present. God is active. God is guiding every step, even when you cannot see the full path. And because of that, you don't have to force anything. You don't have to push outcomes. You don't have to manipulate situations to go your way. You simply stay aligned. You stay grounded. You stay connected. And you trust that God will handle what you cannot, because He always has. And He always will. So when the noise rises again, when the pressure returns, when the opportunity to react presents itself, you will feel it, but you will not be controlled by it. You will recognize it, but you will not be consumed by it. You will stand in that moment with a quiet strength that says, I don't need to respond to this. Not out of avoidance, but out of awareness. Not out of fear, but out of faith. Because you know something now that you didn't fully understand before. You are protected in ways that go beyond what you can see. You are guided in ways that go beyond what you can predict. You are sustained by a power that does not depend on your reaction. And that understanding, it frees you. It frees you to move forward without looking back. It frees you to let go without feeling like you lost something. It frees you to trust without needing constant reassurance. Because you know, deep in your spirit, that God is not just with you, He is ahead of you, making a way, clearing a path, establishing outcomes that no human effort could produce. And as you continue to walk in that truth, you will find yourself living with a level of peace, clarity, and confidence that cannot be taken from you. Not by opinions, not by circumstances, not by anything that tries to pull you out of alignment. Because what God has placed within you is stronger than anything that comes against you. And that is why even now, even here, you don't have to retaliate. You just have to remain.